Think about the background color right now. Any color. It could be green, could be red, could be blue. Let's go with blue. So for today's video, I thought, let's think back to things that just never worked out, like all my past relationships. I was browsing my collection manager until I stumbled across this card, Tree Speaker. And it also got me thinking that treants are kind of an archetype, but this never worked out. You have a bunch of cards that synergize with that, but it never happened to be a real deck. You might include a couple of those cards in your decks, maybe like a token druid or spell-focused druid, but you never really just play treants. And so I made a list. One archetype per class that never worked out. And we start with Treant Druid, which is why I talked about that. So, you have cards like the big man in here, the Might Tree, the mightiest tree of them all. You have Tree Speaker, that changes your treants into ancients. You even have Aeroponics in here, which is basically cutting class, but so much worse. The point is, there are a lot of cards that synergize for treants, it's just that it's not a good deck. I can tell you from personal experience, this is really fun to play though. Every card has kind of synergy with all the other cards. But at the same time, this is just Token Druid a lot worse. Instead of having a giant board by like turn 3 and then you Savage draw and go face and win the game, you have like 2 treants on turn 3, which is one of the reasons why this deck just doesn't see play. But at least people play Arbor up, which kind of summons treants and buffs them. So there's a little bit of treant in every druid. And then for Hunter, I looked at all the cards and I realized we have quests, right? I know there was like Quest Hunter, which was Dexter's favorite deck back in Old Doom, but we also have the old quests for Mangoro. And in there you have Queen Canessa, summon 7 1-cost minions and you get the Queen. Shuffles 15 Raptors into your deck. Those are 1-mana 3/2s that better cry draw you another card. So the idea is you play really aggressive, finish your quest, get Canessa, and then you just flood the board over and over until you win. Now, did this ever become a good deck? No, of course not. The problem in any aggressive deck is if you use your very first turn to not just lose a card, but also kind of skip the turn and you lose 1 mana by setting up a quest, that just doesn't help you. Just think about how insane of an advantage your opponent has if he also plays an aggressive deck without a quest in there. You do nothing, they play a 1-drop. You play a 2-drop, they destroy a 2-drop. And so on and so forth. On top of that, even when you get Queen Canessa, and I played this deck a couple of times, it doesn't really do anything. You get a 5-mana 8/8, which is alright, but then you get a bunch of 1-drops that don't do anything. They draw you a card, and you can flood the board, but at that point in time, your opponent is probably winning the game already. And if not, they play a deck that wins at that point in time. So for that, Quest Hunter never worked out. Now the next one is somewhat controversial because it kind of works out, but doesn't really. You will see why in a second. We have all the supporting cards in the last expansion, which makes this a lot better, but the deck I'm talking about is Hero Power Mage. Now back in Witchwood we got Baku and Gen, right? You include the card in the deck and it changes your hero power, either reduces the cost or buffs the hero power. And you could always play Odd Mage, which never really worked out that well. You could play Even Mage with like the Hawk, or like the one that freezes everything, but that also never really worked out. And with the last expansion we increased the power of our hero power, and we have Mordresh, which has a really cool animation when you play him. However, despite all of that, we don't see Hero Power Mage. We might have different opponents, but whenever I play the game and I face a mage, it's either Flamewaker Mage, which wins by like turn 5, or it's Secret Mage, which also wins by turn 5. Hero Power Mage is kind of a thing, it just isn't a thing, which is why it's on this list. Now you can still play it and it might work, but it's just a bunch of stuff that is a lot better. I just like the fact that they keep on supporting that archetype, which has been dead for years. But I do remember back in the day, I think Reno Jackson, Hearthstone player, played Odd Mage to Legend, so at least it was always somewhat viable, just never really that good. Now believe me, the upcoming deck is more like something you never really seen or heard of, and that is Dragon Murloc Paladin. What a combination. So there were a couple cards in like Descent of Dragons Mate and Galakrond's Awakening that synergize with dragons for Paladin, but also synergize for Murlocs. For example, we have Skyfin and we have Scar Dragon. The picture's on screen. And I've not seen a single person ever trying to build a deck, maybe Ruffle, not sure, that combines both Murlocs and dragons and makes it work. We have cards like Dragon Rider Tilritha, we have Dragon Concert, beautiful artwork. It reduces the cost of the next dragon you play by 2, that's awesome. But then again, this just doesn't work. You even have this Gargoyle, right? In Witchwood you have this Gargoyle, which is shielded minibot plus taunt when you hold a dragon. I'm just confused that they make Dragon Murloc synergy and then it never works and it's not mentioned anywhere and they just stop supporting that. Feels like creating something like Glittermoth for Odd Priest. Remember in Witchwood when after a year all those odd and even cost cards became part of the Hall of Fame? One of those cards was that, Glittermoth. So you would need to play Odd Priest to make this card work. or at least draw your entire deck and then it has an effect. Can you name a single person outside of Ruffle that ever tried to play Odd Priest and make it work? The hero power restores 4 health, but that's the only benefit you get, and then you have Glitter Moth that buffs your minions. It doubles the health, and that's the opposite of playing Odd Priest. There's nothing else to it. This always confused me, kind of like that one thing for Druid, which also Odd Druid nobody ever played. But the point is, they made all those supporting cards for odd and even decks, but they selected odd cards for decks that never play an odd version of those decks. Like, even Shaman makes sense. You have Merc Spark Eel, it's even, you play that, perfectly fine. But Odd Priest? Why would you play that? You wouldn't. And that's why this never became a thing. People just didn't play this. Next is something that is kind of hard to even make a list. English. So I tried to say this sentence here. People tried to play Max in different decks, right? You had like Mage back in the day in GVG. You had Mag Handbuff Paladin like 2-3 years ago. But you never had Mag Rogue. Back in GVG, you got a couple cards for Rogue that are max synergistic. You have the one that buffs your weapon by +1 attack. People played this in like Kingspin Rogue. You have Iron Sensei that buffs your max. And you also have Corkmaster's Wrench. What a weapon. It's an epic weapon that gets a buff if you control a mech. So it's kind of like Corkmaster, but it's his wrench, which then grows bigger when you have a mech. My memory might be flawed, but I can't think about a single time somebody played a mech rogue and also won a game. Like, Iron Sensei is an alright mech when you play Battlegrounds, but in Rogue, I don't think people ever played this. So for that, it just felt weird. They made like somewhat mech rogue possible with all the supporting cards, 2 of them, and it never happened to be a thing. But you could say the same thing about other classes. It's more like I didn't know what to select for rogue because everything kind of worked. So this was like the only thing that didn't work, which stood out for me. Moving on to Shaman, you can guess I will select Freeze Shaman because why? Morabi is still 6 mana. Actually, let's go back. Gazlo is still 6 mana. Do you know this card exists? You never see it. It's a card in GVG. It has the stats of Water Elemental and never sees play. This card should be like 3 mana at max. Maybe 4 on a bad day. But it's 6 mana. That's insane. Back to Morabi. Also 6 mana. Terrible. Terrible card for that much mana. Also, only for Shaman. Why not Mage? In Mage, you could at least play like Frost Nova in that card and have somewhat of a synergy. But in Shaman, to this day, you have close to no supporting cards for Freeze Shaman. And even if you were to do that, it's worse than playing Overload cards. Knights of the Frozen Throne brought so many powerful things. You had like Prince Khalisat, Valony, and so on. Death Knights, the Lich King. And then you have Morabi and Freeze Shaman as an archetype. Look at those cards for Shaman. Do you play Icebreaker as your favorite weapon? Do you play like Warlock into Icebreaker to destroy a minion? So it's like execute, but you also take damage? Yeah, you probably do. We all do. But at least it's an ongoing meme that people will never play because it's terrible. I love Freeze Shaman. For Warlock, we do the same thing as we did in Hunter. We look at the quest and go back to Ongoro. There was Lakari Sacrifice, a card that I have in Golden. I'm not sure why I tell you that, but I have it in Golden. But it's like, who cares about that? So Lakari Sacrifice is basically Nero, but you have to discard your hand. The only way to do this one almost successfully is by including a card like Cataclysm in here, and then you play a quest, you tap on turn 2, draw another card on turn 3, and on turn 4 you might play Marcus's Imp and coin into Cataclysm. You discard 6 cards from your hand, destroy the entire board, maybe summon a Silverware Golem, maybe discard Fist of Jaraxxus. And then for 5 mana that you yet have to spend, you get a portal that only summons 2 3/2 imps. I've done this multiple times. I tried to make this work. This does not work. This is so bad. Like, it is easier to just draw your entire deck to blow up everything and play Nero and then get a portal that summons the entire board full of stuff than doing this. If you wouldn't play Cataclysm to discard your entire hand, you wouldn't finish this quest before you either win the game or lose the game. This would be a lot better if the demons you summon either have like Rush or Charge, it happens at the beginning of your turn, or they have Lifesteal and Taunt, anything, but yeah, they don't, they just have stats, which is why this never worked. And lastly, Warrior, it's kind of like Rogue. I didn't know what to pick, so I just went with yet another card from Ongoro. Great expansion, right? It is Explore Ongoro. They made this card so you can change everything in your deck. You can explore your favorite expansion. And yeah, you didn't. You just never did that. The problem is, you just change every card in your deck that you put in there for a reason, and then you have to spend another mana to discover a card, which, especially right now, gives you so many bad cards, it's not even funny anymore. Even back then, you had to spend 1 more mana for every card you want to play, and then you don't even get the cards you want to play. So this also sadly never became a thing. You can play epic spells like Renounced Darkness and Warlock and have fun, or you play Explore Ongoro and lose a turn later. I always liked the idea of that. Never saw anybody playing this outside of like York casting the spell for them. And that is why I put this on this list as well. Now with that being said, there's something obvious that I 100% forgot about. So let me know what I forgot in the comments down below. My name is Person and I've been your host. And until next week's episode of me sitting here and changing the color of the background lights, take care.